Hello, my fellow strawmen, and welcome back to the Fields of Hay. It's been too long since I broke down an argument for God on this channel, so today we're going to be taking a look at the moral argument. It's not one I've ever found particularly convincing, but I know it's a favorite among some groups of believers, so it's worth my taking the time to address. As with all arguments, there are variations, but the generic version states that first, objective moral facts exist, second, that God is the best explanation for such moral facts being objective, and concluding that God most likely exists. When people use the term objective here, I think there are two definitions which often get conflated. First, there is the sense in which it means something independent of subjective experience, something which is a part of reality regardless of whether a mind is aware of it. For example, rocks are objectively made out of atoms in the sense that they would still be made of atoms whether or not subjective beings like us were around to know about their composition. I don't think that this is the way the argument claims objective moral facts to exist, because God is a subject, and the argument tries to conclude that God, under this definition, would be the source of subject-independent facts. That's a blatant contradiction. So then the other definition that could be applied is to say that objective just refers to rules which have been written down, the way societies write down rules that anyone could reference and be punished for violating. I think this is closer to what believers mean, seeing as their scriptures generally contain the moral commandments that they find to be objective. But just because the rules are written down does not mean that God exists. It could simply be that some person or group of people subjectively agreed on what to write down. Religions understand this, and they aren't claiming that everyone should follow their rules just because they're written down. So I don't think this meaning is quite accurate either. The reason these meanings are so easy to conflate here is because the usage in the moral argument is something in between the other two. I understand that when believers point to objective morality recorded in their scriptures, they mean it as a reference to the morality actually written into reality itself. If there are rules which govern by how we will be judged in the afterlife, rules woven into the fabric of reality, this would live up to the first meaning of objective, at least in the sense of being independent of humans. At the same time, I think it recognizes the second definition of objectivity, that of something which may start subjective but is settled on and set in stone, making it an objective reference. The whole point of the argument is that morality is a subject-dependent thing. In other words, that moral standards can only be created by some mind capable of passing judgment. At the same time, we allegedly find morality written into reality itself. Put these two facts together, and it would imply that reality itself, along with its moral properties, was created by a subjective being, a god. That is my best steelman of the moral argument, and the only way I know to even give it a logically valid structure. The problem I have with the moral argument, then, is the soundness of the first premise. I'm happy to grant that under this strict usage of objective morality, God would be the best explanation, and so finding evidence of such facts would point to the existence of a God. However, by being so strict, this definition requires a high bar to meet. We need evidence of reality itself having some moral structure to it. Not a bunch of people agreeing that murder is wrong, because that's just a plurality of subjective morality. Not scriptures that claim to hold the commandments passed down from the divine, because the claim is not the evidence. And not some near-death supposedly direct experience of the afterlife, because we have no way to verify such experience. I mean something like a scientifically verifiable association of actions and consequences exactly in line with the teachings of karma, or finding prayer to be a successful healing strategy for some particular group of people. And maybe I'm not being creative enough thinking of possibilities, so I welcome theists who want to point to anything else they think may be evidence. But right now, as it stands, I simply see no good reason to think that objective moral facts exist. As far as I can tell, the universe around us is entirely apathetic towards us, and we humans must be responsible for ourselves. To expand on one of those previous points, that we see agreement of some moral stances, such as the near global condemnation of rape or unprovoked killing. These aren't indications of some objective moral source. The empathy we feel can be accounted for naturally under evolution, which in our case selected for us to help strengthen social bonds and improve the survival of the group. Similar fitness improvements can account for the ability to rationalize, which also helps us build morality by trying to avoid hypocrisy. So much of my moral system stems from the simple idea of treating others the way I want to be treated. And since many people can agree on that starting point, we can reach the same conclusions and come to moral agreements. Even if everyone in the world agrees that raping children is always wrong, this is only subjective morality, and not enough to point to God. On the other hand, if there were evidence of our being programmed to follow certain moral directives, that would raise to an acceptable standard for me to call it objective in the way meaningful to the moral argument. But I know of no evidence for a part of our conscience that cannot be accounted for under evolution. So if you're a theist who first finds reason to believe in God, and then narrows that down to a particular God, and then accepts the moral teachings of that God, and finally you conclude that morality is objective, I have no problems with that logic. I'd want to know what other reasons you have to believe in the God, but that would be a discussion for another time. But in this video, I am interested in any other reason to go the other way. To start by identifying some morality which objectively exists, and from there infer the existence of a god. If you think you have that reason, please let me know in the comments, because I'm unaware of one. But if you still believe in the moral argument and you can't provide any such reason, maybe go read a fucking book.